Let me read to you a passage from the 25th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, verses 14 to 30. It's the Gospel for Saturday of the 21st week in Ordinary Time. I will only read part of it because it is a long passage. St. Matthew writes, Jesus told his disciples this parable. A man going on a journey called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered. So I was afraid and went out and hid your money in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's from Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 to 30. It's just part of it, because it's a long passage, the part that relates to what I'm about to say. It concerns that 1 talent man. You know, there is a great range of views among historians as to the principal forces that shape history. Thomas Carlyle, who lived from 1795 to 1881, published his celebrated 3-volumed work, The French Revolution, in the late 1830s, in which he stressed the importance of heroes. For Carlyle, chaotic events, of which the French Revolution was an archetype, we could say, require heroes to take charge. He was reacting against a view that stressed economic and practical factors, of which Das Kapital by Marx was a slightly later expression. Only dynamic individuals could direct the spiritual energies of history effectively. Heroic human action was critical for the betterment of society. Charles Dickens used Carlyle's French Revolution as a major source for his portrayal of events in his novel The Tale of Two Cities. Carlyle's view of the importance of heroic leadership found expression in his further book, based on a series of lectures, entitled On Heroes, Hero Worship, and the Heroic in History, in which he considered different types of heroes: Cromwell, Bonaparte, Shakespeare, Dante, John Knox, Luther, and Muhammad. I tend to think that for those who do not allow for material forces and laws to be determinants of history, Carlyle's view is the natural and obvious one. History is shaped by heroic leaders, for good or ill, and those with exceptional gifts have the responsibility to put them to use. However, that having been said, this point of view can be disputed or qualified. It can surely be argued that it is the mass of little people, made up of individuals exercising their power of choice, which is the real shaper of history and of the world. It is critical for mankind that the ordinary person make of his humdrum life a thing of grandeur by exercising in heroic manner his unnoticed gifts in his unremarkable circumstances. The ordinary person who is extraordinarily good may appear to have limited impact on the world, but he certainly shows the way for the countless other ordinary persons who make up 99% of humanity. If each and all had the ambition of being good, how good the world would be. Chapter 25 of St. Matthew's Gospel is one of the most famous in the Gospels for the simple fact that it contains our Lord's panoramic description of the general judgment of all the nations at the end of time. It goes for 16 verses and stresses the common judgment by God on all mankind and on every member of it, an eternity of heaven and hell, and the pivotal importance of our judgment of the just and merciful treatment of neighbour. Christ will identify with the least of our brothers and sisters and will take as being done to him whatever we do to the least important man or woman. But there are two other parables immediately prior to this in the same chapter, both concerned with the judgment of God. There is the parable of the wise and foolish virgins, at the end of which Christ warns us to watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour when the Son of Man comes. Chapter 25, verse 1 to 13. The next parable is our passage today, chapter 25, verses 14 to 30. And it is just as long as our Lord's teaching on the general judgment immediately following it. It is most stimulating to observe that our Lord stresses the dire consequences for the little person, the person of very modest talents, the person who is scarcely likely to make a splash, if he neglects to put what he has to diligent use. We may perhaps say that, as against Carlyle's focus on the very notable individuals who lead the masses, our Lord is here saying that in the plan of God, the plan of the Lord of history, each unknown individual is critical to the fulfillment of the divine plan. We all matter. We all matter a great deal. We shall never know in this life the ramifications in God's sight and in the workings of his providence of the hidden heroism of ordinary persons who resolve to seek the sanctity of Christ in ordinary everyday life. As we heard in the Gospel, then the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, You wicked, lazy servant, throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew chapter 25, verse 14 to 30. It matters enormously to God that we, each one of us, no matter how modest our talents and circumstances, apply ourselves to the wheel of life and do God's will as it presents itself to us in the duties of everyday life. The call to personal holiness is universal. What the world needs are not Bonapartes, but saints. Saints in ordinary households and in ordinary work settings. Yes, we need saints at the helm, of course, such as St. Thomas More, Chancellor of England, and St. Louis, King of France. But really, what is that before the mass of mankind? What is needed is what Christ stresses, the vast stream of 1 talent persons taking up the call to goodness and carrying it through to the very end, unbeknown to others, but known very well by the one who matters, God.